Hi everyone, my name is Jen. I'm an author and a book reviewer, and like many bookish people online, this is my favourite time of year. And I've been making videos about books on this channel for 10 years, and consequently I have made quite a few bookish recommendations for autumn winter months, and yet you're still asking me to make more. And I hear you, and that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to try and not mention loads of books that I've talked about before, because I have other videos of autumn book recommendations that you can hunt out, search for if you would like to do so. So today I'm going to talk you through, I have about 30 books here I think, so I'm going to talk you through books that I would recommend for autumn and winter months. Some of them are books I've read recently and haven't spoken about at all on this channel yet, haven't even hauled actually, so I'm excited to talk to you about those. And then I'm also going to talk to you about books that I may get to in the autumn winter months. I had quite a fun time going through my bookshelves thinking about what I could pick out as a potential TBR, very loose TBR, a wish list of things that I would read if I didn't have a little baby and had all the time in the world, that kind of thing. So we're going to talk about those as well. Everything I mention will be linked in the description box down below. This video is also very kindly sponsored by Series Readers, but we'll talk about that in a bit. So let's just jump in and let's talk about books that I have read recently and absolutely adored, one of which, several of which actually I think are going to be on my best books of the year list, but we're getting ahead of ourselves because that's in a couple of months' time. Right, this is just so wholesome. It made me so happy, I can't even tell you. This is The Fortnight in September by R.C. Sherriff. I hauled this one a couple of years ago. I bought it because I read his book, The Hopkins Manuscript, which ended up being one of my favourite books the year that I read it. That book is very different and yet similar to this. So that is a diary of a man who is recording what's happening as he realises that the moon is about to collide with the earth, and it's set in the 30s. It's an allegory for the run-up to the Second World War and chaos breaking out. But as much as it's a scary dystopian book about big end of the world things happening, it's set in a small country town and it's just this one man and his thoughts. It's quite quiet. So this is that, but without the end of the world happening. This is set over 2 weeks in September about the Stevens family who travel to Bognor Regis every year to go to the seaside. They stay in exactly the same place and they have exactly the same spot on the beach that they want to go and sit at. They have their routines that they do, and it's just about that. It's about the run up to the holiday, about thinking about all the things they have to pack and all the things they have to get done. And rarely have I read a book that really harvests the minutiae of everyday life and presents it in such a wonderful way. As an example, when they get on the train, Mr. Stevens goes and buys magazines for everyone, for his kids and for himself, and he hands his wife, I think it's a sewing or a knitting magazine, and in his head he thinks, that's great, I'm going to give her this magazine because she has this horrible habit of sitting opposite me on the train and looking at me during this train ride and smiling, and it really unnerves me and I don't like it. And then in a couple of paragraphs you hear from Mrs. Stevens and she's thinking, I love this train journey because it's the one time I get to sit and look at my husband and we share this really intimate moment. And it's just very funny because they're on completely different pages and don't even realise. Nothing really happens in this book, like nothing terrible happens, I think is what I mean. Nothing terrible happens. This is just 2 weeks of their lives, and it just made me smile from ear to ear as I was reading it. And as soon as I finished it, I bought a copy for my mum and sent it to her. This is a Persephone classic, and they have a series of books that they have reissued with actual covers because all of their books are this lovely grey, but they have some with covers. I will insert the cover here, and that's one of them. It's their most popular titles that they've done like this, so this is one of those. And there is another R.C. Sherriff title that I have sitting on my shelf downstairs called Green Gates, which I'm so tempted to pick up, but I don't know if I just should save it for next autumn. I don't know, because he doesn't have that many titles for me to get to after this one. But yeah, if you would just like a book that's like a hug, you should read this one. Then recently, this was a recommendation from one of you, and I'm sorry, your name has completely exited my head. Massive apologies, but recently I did a video where I recommended 100 picture books, 100 children's books, and one of you commented saying that you were a children's librarian in the States and you wanted to recommend me some books, and I picked up several of them. First is a trilogy about Sato the rabbit, and these I would say they're not for young children. I mean, I'm reading them, I'm an adult and I absolutely love them. I would say they're middle grade-ish. So Sato the rabbit, this is by Yuki Ainoya. These are what they call in Japan palm of the hand stories. We would call them flash fiction, but that sounds much less beautiful. Palm of the hand stories. I think there are about 7 in each of the 3 books, and they're magical realism. Remind me a little bit actually of The Little Prince. If you enjoy that kind of whimsy, then you will really like this. So the first one is called Sato the Rabbit. The second one is Sato the Rabbit, the Moon. And the third one is Sato the Rabbit, the Sea of Tea. I think my favourite is the second one, is the Moon, but they're all absolutely gorgeous. Let me give you an example of what they're like. So this is the second one, the Moon, and one of the stories is called Falling Rain. It looks like it will rain today. Sato the rabbit gets ready for a rain party. First, the music. Next, a specially made ribbon. The rain arrives. Drip drop, plink plonk, splitter, splatter, splash. Sato ties the rain with a ribbon. I mean, look at that. And then boom boom, tinka tink tink, bum 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 bum. Rain music echoes through the rain column ballroom. It just again makes me so very happy. What do I like at this time of year? I like wholesome, warm, cozy, comforting things, and then I also like crime, horror, creepy things. So I've got a mixture of all of these things here. I should also have said this right at the beginning, actually. I would recommend, if I may, 2 of my own books to you. I have written 14 books for both adults and children, so I've got one here for adults, one here for kids. This is a book I wrote for grown-ups called The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night. 12 short stories, some of which are creepy, including one about a world where you can buy animal hearts online and put them inside people. Yes. And then also The Sister Who Ate Her Brothers and Other Gruesome Tales by me, illustrated by Adam D'Souza. This is for middle grade upwards, so 7, 8 upwards. It is a collection of 14 gruesome fairy tales from around the world, retold by me, and it has positive representation of disfigurement, disability and queerness in it as well. So just a quick shout out to that. And speaking of shout outs, I have to quickly thank the sponsor of today's video, who is Serious Readers. You have leapt into the future. It is now the evening. I am looking decidedly more dishevelled, but that would make sense because time has passed, and Mr. M and I have had dinner. He's in the kitchen making us a cup of tea, and I'm about to curl up with this book here, which is a book that I'm actually going to talk to you about in a second. My past self is going to talk to your future self. What is time? Anyway, I'm going to read this using this in the background, which is my high definition light from Serious Readers, who, as I said, are very kindly sponsoring this video. They first emailed me in November 2021 to introduce themselves to me and ask if I would like to try their light, and if I enjoyed it, whether I could work with them. And so I said, yes, please send it my way, because I really like the sound of them. They're a small UK-based company. They make all of their lights here, and they've invented something called daylight wavelength technology, which mimics daylight as much as possible to make sure that your eyes are not straining when you're reading, which is very important. So I tried it back then, loved it, loved them. They're just really lovely folk to work with, and I've been working with them every autumn and winter since then. So you firmly have my stamp of approval for these guys, and they have given me a code if you would like to use it. The code is Jenn24. I will link them in the description box down below, and that code, if you want to use it, will get £100 off a high definition light and free UK delivery. So the high definition light, you can have it cordless or wired. It's a floor light. You can adjust the height, you can tilt it whichever way you want, and adjust the brightness of the light as well. I think it's great. Check them out if you would like to. Link is down below along with the code, and thank you very much to them for sponsoring this video. I feel like the beginning of this video was very chaotic energy. I've just had a slurp of tea and I'm going to try and be less chaotic going forward. The other book that I wanted to recommend that was recommended to me, just passing on these recommendations by the lovely American librarian who commented, is this one here called Little Witch Hazel, A Year in the Forest by Phoebe Wahl. This is set across the seasons, so you've got one illustrated short story for each of the seasons. Naturally, the autumn one was my favourite, which is about a haunted stump. But yes, Little Witch Hazel is just going about her business in the forest, helping out her animal friends. It's very wholesome and lovely, and the illustrations are gorgeous. Okay, I'm going to spend slightly less time talking about the others in this list, otherwise we're going to be here forever. I recently read She's Always Hungry by Eliza Clark, which is her brand new short story collection. She is the author of Boy Parts and Penance. This was everything I wanted really from her and what I had expected this book to be as well, which was creepy and also really funny. Something I love about Eliza's work in particular is the way she really nails teenage girls' voices. I just think that she just completely embodies those characters that she writes. They're so believable, cutting, witty, horrible a lot of the time. My favourite short story in this is a really funny one. It's called Chitterly and it's told in a series of Just Eat reviews. It's this fusion restaurant which claims to do Italian Chinese food, and people order it because they're so intrigued by it and think, what the heck could this food actually be? And it's just a series of perplexed and often very negative reviews, but also people confused because they say that when they order online, their order often arrives even before they've checked out, delivered by a man who's very mysterious wearing a biker helmet, but he arrived in a car, and it's just all very ridiculous, delightfully silly. I would recommend this very, very much. Then we've got Ghosted by Jenn Ashworth. This is a book all about grief. It's a woman who hasn't told people that her partner has left. He left his phone and his wallet at home and he's just gone out of the flat, and she's really embarrassed about that. So when his mother, for instance, calls, she tells her that he's in the shower or that he's just stepped out of the house. And then when it becomes clear that maybe he's not coming back and she thinks, oh my God, maybe something's happened, I need to go to the police are obviously very suspicious of her because they think maybe she's done something to him, because why didn't she come forward sooner? This is one of those books where you really want characters to make better decisions and they don't, and it's frustrating, but also then you're tied to the story and you really are invested and need to know what happens. So this one, yeah, creepy and upsetting. This is a book I read earlier in the year called Paradise Rot by Jenny Hval, which is translated from the Norwegian by Mayim Idris. I would recommend this for fans of Tessa Moshfegh because it's a little bit gross. It's about a woman called Jo who starts attending university and loses her sense of self. She is living with a woman who has no boundaries. They live in this big open space and they're just in each other's business all the time, and their bodies feel like they're merging with the plants that are growing, and also there's mold on the walls, and it's all just a bit clammy and claustrophobic. And if that sounds like your cup of tea, then I think you will enjoy it. Yeah, definitely a little bit disgusting, but great. I find myself gravitating towards classics at this time of year, so I thought I'd give out a shout out to one of my favourites, which is Passing by Nella Larsen. I've mentioned this book so many times on this channel, so I will quickly move on, but if you haven't read it, please do. It's very short. It's about two women called Claire and Irene, set in 1920s Harlem. Both are lighter skinned black women. One is passing for white, has married a white man, and Irene, our main character, has married a black man, is extremely happy. She runs into Claire, and this reignited, in inverted commas, friendship threatens both of them because Claire is hiding her identity, her family, her past from her partner, who's extremely racist. And this is such a tense book. It's so tense. It's so good. I would also recommend Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Kupersmith. I read this because it was longlisted for the Women's Prize in 2021, was it? 2021 or 2022? And I really enjoyed it. It's a debut novel, and I think parts of it are a little bit messy, but when it works, it really, really, really works. It's set in Vietnam, and it's about two women, one Vietnamese woman and one Vietnamese American woman, and it's about how their lives are kind of mirroring each other even though they live decades apart. It is a ghost story. It is very, very creepy. There are scenes in here that I will never forget. So if you would like to be scared, then maybe read that one. If you would like something more cozy but also very deep, meaningful, and just tapping into humanity so very well, I would recommend Playing Games by Huma Qureshi. I can't remember if this is set in the autumn and winter, so I don't know why I'm recommending it as a book for this time of year, but I also find myself gravitating towards family sagas at this time of year, and this is an in-depth look at a relationship between two sisters. And yeah, it was one of my favourite books of last year. I've spoken about it quite a lot, but if you have not taken my recommendation, there is a push to do so. The Silent House by Nell Pattison is a thriller that I would recommend. This is Own Voice's deaf representation and is about an interpreter who's called to the scene of a murder where a child has been killed. A child in a deaf family. Nobody heard who came into the house or knew that anything had happened until the morning, and it's about the interpreter's relationship with this family. It's the first in a trilogy, but you don't have to read all of them. It's a standalone as well. I also find myself gravitating towards non-fiction at this time of year, so if that is also you, I would recommend Ordinary Wonder Tales by Emily Urquhart. This is heavily inspired by folklore, which is why I recommend it as an autumnal book. And I mean, the colours on here would also suggest that it is for this time of year. Let me just read you this from the blurb. Urquhart reveals the truths that underline our imaginings, what we see in our heads when we read, how the sight of a ghost can heal, how the entrance to the underworld can be glimpsed in an oil painting or in a winter storm or in the onset of a loved one's dementia. I adore her writing so much. And then finally, before we move into books that are on my TBR, we've got Night Side of the River by Jeanette Winterson. I especially adore her collection Christmas Days, which is a collection of 12 stories and pieces of non-fiction about Christmas. So I'd recommend that for the winter months, but if you want something for now going into the winter months, this is a collection that's quite similar but is ghost stories and is about houses that she has lived in, so real life hauntings that she has experienced alongside fiction. She can spin a good yarn. If you've ever heard her read her work, you know what I mean. She's an excellent storyteller. And I also would like to recommend a Sarah Waters. Any would be perfect for this time of year. But I find myself thinking about The Paying Guests most of all. If you had asked me when I finished reading it if it was my favourite Sarah Waters, I would have said no. And I would have said that my favourite probably is Fingersmith or Tipping the Velvet. But this is actually the one I find myself thinking about the most and would quite like to reread. I read it for the first time when I was at Bradford Literary Festival. I remember listening to it in my hotel room and just having a great time. This is about a mother and her daughter Frances. It's in the 1920s. They're short on money, so they decide to let out one of their rooms. And I don't really want to say more than that. This is a book kind of two halves. Something happens and then the whole tone twists and changes. If you've read Sarah Waters before, you will know that it's going to be a queer story and it's going to be a bit gothic-y in nature. And yeah, it's very, 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 very good. Now, books that I may pick up in the coming months. A book that I often reread at this time of year is When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit by Judith Kerr. It's a novel, but it's a novelised version of her life. Judith Kerr fled Germany in the 1930s. This is her rendition of that, talking about a girl called Anna instead of using her own name. So a girl called Anna and her brother Max flee Germany with their parents in 1933 because her dad is outspoken against Hitler, is a writer, and they flee to Switzerland where they live for 6 months. Then they live in Paris for 2 years and then they move to London. When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit is about that experience, about being a refugee, about learning different languages and being in different schools and just feeling completely lost. It is such a perfect book. I love it. There are 2 other books in this series following Anna or Judith throughout her life, and I read them after I finished reading When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit, and I must have been about 10 or 11, and I remember really not liking them, and I don't think I've revisited them. I've probably revisited them once maybe, but I think I was still very young, and I just had an epiphany the other day thinking maybe I didn't like those sequels because I couldn't relate to them, because the second one is when Anna is 15, 16, and then the third one I think she's in her late 20s or early 30s, and I was 11, 12. I didn't particularly care about adults, how boring. So I thought I love When Hit the Stomping Rabbit so much, I should give those other books a chance. So I think I'm going to do that, at least try the second one. If I like that, go on to the third one. So the second one is called The Other Way Round, and it's about Anna living in London during the Blitz. So I'm definitely going to be reading this one. In fact, I know because I started reading it last night. So I'm going to read this and see if I have been unkind to it previously, and maybe I will really love it this time. Then, speaking of non-fiction, as I was before, I picked this off the shelf. It's one of John Burnside's non-fiction books. John Burnside actually passed away this year, and this is his book, I Put a Spell on You. I went through a period of just picking up John Burnside books in bookshops whenever I happened to see them. And when I looked at this on my shelf, I couldn't remember what it was about. I just knew that it was a memoir, and then I reread the blurb and thought, wait, why haven't I read that? It sounds brilliant. I love his poetry, and I've really enjoyed many of his novels. Not all of them, but many of them. So this is what the blurb says. Beginning with memories of a brutal murder, this book is a tangled memoir of digressions on voodoo, acid, and insomnia, of uncanny encounters with lost girls, of growing up to the soundtrack of the Four Tops and Screamin' Jay Hawkins, of time spent lost in the Arctic Circle and equally lost in a mental institution. I mean, why haven't I read his non-fiction before if I love other things that he does? As I mentioned, I really like gravitating. I find myself gravitating towards, I really like family sagas in the colder months. And this, I think, was on my TBR last autumn and winter, and I didn't get to it, which is When We Were Sisters by Fatima Asghar. So I think I would like to maybe get to it this year, please, especially because I bought the US edition of this because it wasn't available in the UK yet, and now it is. One of those frustrating times, you know, when you buy, for instance, the hardback because you're very excited, and by the time you get to read it, the paperback has been released and you just have a stern word with yourself. So yes, having stern words with myself about this one. It says, in this heartrending lyrical debut work of fiction, Fatima Asghar traces the intense bond of three siblings left to raise one another after the death of their parents. I read their poetry collection, If They Come For Us, and really loved it. So I'm hoping I will enjoy their fiction as well. Oh, going back to non-fiction a second. I maybe could have organised these into genres, but apparently I wasn't feeling that today. We have two more non-fiction books here. Just the two? Yes, just two. So we've got Languages Are Good For Us by Sophie Hardach. Sophie has written a novel called Confession with Blue Horses, which I absolutely loved, and this is a non-fiction book, as you may guess, all about languages. I won't read you the whole blurb, I'll just read you the very end. It says, this is a book about languages and the people who love them. It is about the strange and wonderful ways in which humans have used languages since the days of the earliest clay records, about the linguistic threads that connects us all. Above all, it is about pleasure. I trust her very much. She's also a journalist, have loved lots of her pieces. She wrote about motherhood and IVF, and I was really moved by that. And then also, this is a non-fiction book that I'm gravitating towards because I love reading about nature this time of year. And this is Moving Mountains, Writing Nature Through Illness and Disability, edited by Louise Kenwood. So this is a collection of essays, and I think poetry as well. There may be a few poems in here by disabled writers about their relationship with nature. I would like to read this one and also finish reading this book here, which is called We've Got This, which is an anthology of essays by disabled parents on parenting. I've been really, really enjoying this one. And then we've got 4 short story collections apparently that I've pulled off my shelves. One by Ha-Sung Nang, which is translated from the Korean by Janet Hong. This is Bluebeard's wife. I really enjoyed her collection Flowers of Mold, which I read probably 4 years ago now, actually, around Halloween, and I've been meaning to get to this collection as well because she has other books out, and I have told myself that I'm not going to buy them until I have read this one. Lots of her short stories are horror and folklore, you know, combined, which I enjoy. Then we have 7 Empty Houses by Samantha Schweblin, and this is translated from the Spanish. Is it by Megan McDowell? Yes, by Megan McDowell. It says, the world of Samantha Schweblin's short stories is dark and destabilizing. Here, home is not a place of safety, but the site of hidden danger, silent menace, and unspoken resentment. I also love a themed collection sometimes, so that sounds fun. Dead End Memories by Banana Yoshimoto. This is translated from the Japanese by Asa Yanida. I used to love Banana Yoshimoto's writing so much. I really enjoyed Kitchen. My favourite was a book called NP, which is about murder in translation. And then when I have revisited her work recently, I just really have found it quite lacking and have been quite frustrated with that. But I think it may be that I don't love her novels as much anymore. But this is a collection of short stories, and I think her ideas are often wonderful. I just don't love the execution over a prolonged period of time. So I'm hoping that short fiction may be something that I still love by her. I don't know. I'm also finding it slightly frustrating, I suppose, that the work of hers that's being published now is often really, really old. So from the 80s or 90s, and is now coming out here. So consequently, even though it's new in inverted commas, it feels slightly dated. This is a collection of short stories that was first published in 2003. So this one is still 20 years old, but still a bit newer than some of the other ones. And then the other short story collection that I found myself picking off the shelf was The Flicker Against the Light and Writing the Contemporary Uncanny by Jane Alexander. A woman walks through a virtual reconstruction of the destroyed streets where she and her lover used to live. A young man trades away his youth and something of himself in the plasma extracted from his blood. A clone addresses her dead doubled self as she tries to understand her personal history. So these are uncanny stories. It says Black Mirror meets M.R. James. So that sounds like it could be perfect for this time of year. And then a couple more. Speaking of classics, as I was before, I would like to revisit some more John Wyndham. I've only done one book haul, I think, this year, and it was around my birthday when I bought quite a few John Wyndham books. So I need to do, at some point, a video where I talk to you about all the books I've read this year, because I haven't done that yet, and a video where I talk about all the books I've bought this year, because I haven't done that yet either. Those are going to be pretty epic videos. You can expect those in the next month or so. But yeah, the John Wyndham ones I would really love to get to. I have read now The Midwich Cuckoos, Day of the Triffids, Chrysalids, Chucky, which I read earlier this year. Some of his short stories, I haven't read an entire collection, but I've dipped into some of his short stories. And then these are two novels that I would quite like to get to. Old school sci-fi, I just found that really fun. So this is Stowaway to Mars. It's about a woman who gets on as a stowaway in this spaceship that's going to Mars. You could probably tell that from the title and what happens when she does that. And this is The Kraken Wakes, which is, I think, narrated by a married couple who then discover this sea creature that's causing havoc. And both of these sound brilliant. So I'm hoping to read those probably in November. And then finally, a book that I have recommended so many times in autumn winter book recommendation videos is The Book Collector by Alice Thompson. It's a book that riffs on Jane Eyre, which I love. It also talks about folklore a lot. It's gothic. It is just so brilliant. At least I have memories of it being brilliant. I haven't read it in about 10 years. And when I recommend books that I haven't read in that long, I think, would I still love those now? I don't know, but hopefully I would. Anyway, I was speaking to Jean the other day. She was visiting, she was down, and we were talking about The Book Collector. And then I said, you know, I had another book by her called Burnt Island, and I haven't read it. And then I had a memory of unhauling it when we moved ages ago, years ago, and I have no idea why I unhauled it, because I definitely didn't read it. That's ridiculous of me. So I very rarely regret unhauling a book. And I actually very rarely unhaul books that I've never read. I don't know what was going on. I was clearly having a moment. So I rebought it. So this is Burnt Island by Alice Thompson. And I would love to read it this autumn because Jean and I were reading the blurb of it and just thinking how perfect it sounds. It says, struggling writer Max Long arrives on Burnt Island to work on his next novel. There he encounters best-selling author James Fairfax, whom Max suspects of not being the real author of the book that has made his fortune. Furthermore, Fairfax's wife has gone missing. In a desperate bid for success, Max decides to compromise his talent by writing a horror bestseller. Recently divorced and increasingly mentally unstable, he witnesses disturbing visions that take the form of the horror he is attempting to write. Is Max losing his mind or his soul? What is the truth about Fairfax? And what is the secret of Burnt Island? An ironic satire on literary ambition, Alice Thompson's sixth novel soon turns into something more sinister. And it's got a quote on the back from Ali Smith who says it's brilliant. So what am I doing having not read it, and not only having not read it, but unhauled it? Ridiculous. So yes, I'm going to give that one a go as well. So those are recommendations of books that I would say are worth picking up in the autumn and winter months, and books that I would like to potentially pick up in these autumn and winter months. I would love to know what recommendations you have. Please leave those in a comment down below. Also tell me if you've read any of these and what you thought of them. If you're new to my channel and you enjoyed this video and you would like to stick around, please do hit subscribe. And if you like my videos and you would like to consider supporting me on Patreon, that'd be very kind. Patreon is a place where you can tip creators whose work you enjoy, throw $1 or £1 in the tip jar, and the support over there allows me to keep creating free content for you all on here and supports my time making it accessible by creating captions and all of that good stuff. Thank you also to Serious Readers for sponsoring this video, and if you haven't checked them out, link is in the description box down below. I hope you're all doing okay, and I will speak to you very soon. I'm sending lots of love. Bye.